What's the timeline for the application process for vet school?
Sure. So typically the summer before you apply, so normally you're trying to apply in fall of your senior year, but the summer before, so between junior and senior year, you're going to be taking your GRE. Try your hardest to get the best score you can the first time, because most every time after that, you'll get a very similar score. So just try your hardest at that. So you're taking your GRE, you're sending them off to prospective schools. And then throughout that summer, you're completing the VMCAS. It's VMCAS, I believe, if it's the same application. The application, which is a general, kind of just doing your personal statement, turning in all your transcripts, making sure your people who are doing recommendation letters are getting them sent in. And I believe that's due, it's either middle of August or middle of September, they'll say on their website. But that's getting done then, and then it gets sent to whatever schools you pick. I believe there is a set couple number of schools that you can pick, and then every school after, I think it's 2 or 3, you have to pay an additional fee. And then once you submit that application to the schools, they will usually contact you asking for supplemental information. Sometimes it's sending another personal statement or updating grades. I know Madison, I want to say it was like mid-October, mid-November, they sent me something asking if I had done anything additional. So any additional vet shadowing, vet work, animal handling, any additional extracurriculars. So that's kind of good to note that even after you've submitted your main application, keep working on all that experience and anything that you think will help you get into veterinary school, because they're looking at the whole you, not just what you've done so far. And then usually somewhere around, I'd say like January to March, there are schools that will be doing interviews. So like Minnesota, Iowa, Michigan, those are 3 I can think of off the top of my head. Madison does not do interviews. So they'll be doing those interviews then, and then usually the end of February to April, they'll be letting you know whether you made it in or you're waitlisted, or if you have to try next year.
Great.
So,
Helpful information. Because my question was, what is the exam that you take for? So it's the GRE for vet school.
Yep. So the graduate records exam.
Okay.
It's not as bad as everybody makes it out to be, I swear. It is a long process, but once you get into vet school and have to take your boards exam, you'll be like, man, the GRE was so short compared to this. So it does prep you for that part. But for the GRE, all I did was I went and rented books from the library for it was like GRE for Dummies and GRE 101, and really just like getting yourself acclimated to the questions they ask, because it's not asking you what you know, it's essentially asking how you take exams. So as long as you guys can look through those kind of test prep books and be able to follow along and kind of get going with those, it'll get you a long ways. And I know there is like a GRE writing assessment little help book I did. So just, you don't have to buy a lot of those books. Just go to your public library or your school library and see if you can rent them, and work your way through them.
Okay. Let's see. I'm not sure if you've addressed this yet, but what items or credentials are needed for acceptance into the program, courses or extracurricular? You kind of touched on that, but maybe you can get a little more specific.
Sure. So every vet school vary a little bit. So if you go to like Madison's vet page and click on prospective students, they should have kind of a list there of the prerequisites. Kind of just for basic requirements, you're going to need organic chemistry. I believe you only need 1 semester, which is great. You need biochemistry. You don't need calculus for Madison, which is also awesome. I know I was super relieved when I found that out. And then just kind of your basic biologies and science courses, and then all of your general eds, just to graduate your undergrad. But again, they'll be way more specific on the page for the vet school. As for other types of requirements, so there are some veterinary schools that require a minimum number of veterinary hours. I believe North Carolina was one of them. Madison does not require that. So when I applied, I think I maybe had like 150 veterinary hours, but because I worked on a dairy farm, I lived on a dairy farm, and then I was always active. All those hours count. So even if you guys can't get hours shadowing at your vet clinic or working at a vet clinic or anything, but you're volunteering like at the animal shelter, or you have your own animals, or you're in 4-H or FFA or whatever, make sure you count those hours too, because they look really good that you're committed to something, you're helping out, you're still trying to get hands-on experience, even if you can't be at a veterinary clinic. And then other than that, I think they just really want to look for a well-rounded person. So when I was in undergrad, I was very active with different clubs. So I was in the dairy club, in the pre-vet club. I was in a agricultural sorority, so I was in Sigma Alpha at my school. And I think it just kind of showed that, you're able to juggle multiple things. You can juggle a hard course load while also still being active in the environment and working. Because really veterinary school is a huge test of how much you can juggle with the huge course load you're going to have to take there and just focus on. So I think just, trying your hardest at school, and then just trying to do as much as you can, know your limits and know your stopping point, but just being the best well-rounded person you can be is kind of what they're looking for.
Interesting. Are there any particular majors that they're looking for? Or, at what point do you have to figure that part out in terms of declaring a major and deciding you want to go to vet school, et cetera?
So I would say probably by your second year, you want to have the pre-veterinary requirements started. So my first year, like I said, I started out at the University of Wisconsin, Rock County. So I obviously wasn't doing any animal science courses then, but I was still doing like my biologies and chemistries. And I guess they don't have major specifics. And I know at River Falls, pre-veterinary wasn't a major, it was an emphasis at the time. I don't know if it's changed now, but knowing that you can have a whatever your major is, be able to line up with those prerequisites, so you're not there for 5 or 6 years, you're still trying to get out in the 4 years, I think is super important. So I would say for sure by your guys' sophomore year, make sure that you're kind of on track with the classes you have to take, and going from there.
That's helpful. Let's see. In terms of letters of recommendation, what types of variety of sources are usually needed, or did you have to pull together?
Sure. So I submitted 4 letters of recommendation. I believe they require at least 3. Let's see, I had 2 veterinarians were them, and then 2 of them were just my advisors at school. I would say, for sure, try and get a veterinarian who knows you well to write at least 1 letter of recommendation, because they're going to be kind of your best into veterinary school, especially if they graduated from the school you went to. They'll be able to say, yes, I've seen them work with animals. Yes, I think they're up to this. They'll really be able to talk about your personality. Also being able to have your advisors at school, because they'll kind of attribute to how dedicated you are, what classes you're really looking into. And then, looking at, so some of my advisors were also in the sorority or the clubs I was in, and I was very active in those and had leadership positions in those. So that was super helpful because they could kind of talk about those points. I know other people have also included, like, if you're super involved in band or the marching band, or in a sport and you're a captain of like the soccer team or something, even having them be able to write a letter just to kind of talk about the other points that maybe your veterinarian hasn't seen. It's also good to include those in there. And one thing to make sure you guys ask when you ask for letters of recommendation, make sure you say, would you be able to write a positive letter of recommendation for me, just to ensure that they're not going to write a bad one or a mediocre one, because you really need those references to speak good about you, because it is very, very intense and hard to get into veterinary school, and especially one like Madison that doesn't do interviews. So you are totally relying off of what you write and what other people are writing about you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I always assumed a letter of recommendation is positive, but I suspect it can't hurt to emphasize that word and give that direction.
Yep. And when I was shadowing veterinarians, I don't remember where I was at, but I know one of them, he had politely told somebody, you should ask somebody else to write a letter. But you can't rely on everybody to be that nice and upfront. So it's always good to just say, would you write a positive one about me? So,
Mm.
and I know in the application process, you can choose to have them send them to you first so that you read them first before they're submitted. I didn't do that. I had heard some people say that it goes against your application a little bit because then they think that you're trying to approve them first. I can't say either way whether it does go against your application or not, but I didn't choose to read them. I just had them submit
Mm.
them and go from there. So,
Okay, that's a good little nuance to consider and ask, give some thought to for the students on the call. That's great. We made it through our kind of formalized questions. I didn't see any chat of questions come through. Do any of you want to ask a question while we're still on this topic of admissions that we haven't covered? Happy to open it up. Just raise your hand and I'll call on you. Okay, I guess we answered all of, oh, there we go, Bella, sure.
So for like your GPA, does experience matter more than GPA or like the other way around? Like if you have like a lower GPA but you're really experienced, like how does that work out really?
So I would say they probably have about equal weight. So I'll be honest, when I applied, I think I had like a 3.3 GPA, which is pretty low compared to most students trying to get into veterinary school. However, I kind of had the advantage that I put on my application as going for food animal. I wanted to work with dairy cattle. And there's a shortage of food animal veterinarians. And then also all my experience was for the large animal and the food animal. But I would try your hardest at trying to have a high GPA, and then also trying to supplement with as many veterinary hours as you can. Because I know that I know several people who have had thousands and thousands of hours, but have like a 3.2 GPA and they can't get in. Something that I also did, I think I had C's in organic chemistry, 2 in biochem, I think. And I retook those. So I retook one during the summer and I retook one the next fall and I got A's in them. And I know Madison doesn't look at the previous grade, they just look at the highest grade or the most recent one. So that helped me. I had to spend a little extra money to retake them, but I think it helped showing that I was willing to go back and do better and then, put the extra effort forward and get the better grade. So I would still try your hardest to get the highest GPA, and then, work as much as you can too.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Madison asked about what is considered a good GPA to get into vet school.
Sure. So for Madison, every year they'll post the average GPA of what the previous year's acceptance class was. I don't know what the average was at the top of my head, but I would say from talking to most of my classmates, I would say like a 3.7 and above was a good GPA. So, and like I said, mine when I first applied was a 3.3. I think when I graduated, so you apply again between junior and senior year. I think by the time I graduated, I was up around a 3.6. So mine steadily went up. But I would try and keep it above like a 3.7. So.
Was the 3.6 after you retook those classes?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
So that would have been after I retook the classes,
Okay.
and then just kind of completing the rest of them and getting A's in those. So, yep.
Okay. Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions before we move on to the experience in the program? Well, if you think of anything, just send me a chat and we'll make sure we cover it. We don't want you to come away not thinking you got your questions answered. So moving on to experience in the program, how did your graduate school or vet school experience differ from your undergraduate school experience in terms of living and learning?
So veterinary school is a lot different in that you are given a lot larger and heavier course load. So just for an example, I remember telling my dad my first year through our physiology course, we completed what we did a whole semester in undergrad in a month in vet school. So it is very fast paced. It is a lot of information, and it's thrown at you pretty hard. So just knowing that there's a huge change in pace there, but also knowing that, again, you're most likely going to have smaller class sizes. So if you go to like UW-Madison currently, where you probably have 400 students in your organic chemistry course, you're not going to have that many in veterinary school. So you can definitely walk up to them and talk to them. Going to UW River Falls, I never had that problem. We have relatively small class sizes there, so it was super nice. But knowing that, that's one of the huge differences. And then also knowing, so kind of a big thing that, you know, they don't really tell you or you don't really expect. When you get to veterinary school, you're going for another 4 years of school while all your friends are kind of moving on with their life. So that's a little bit hard, is knowing that you still are going to be in school. You still have to study for all those exams and stay up and get all the stuff done. So you might have to miss out on some events in your friends and your family's life. Now, that doesn't mean you're missing Christmas or Thanksgiving or anything like that. But you know, you might not be able to go to this wedding or go to that party or do those types of things. So that's kind of one of the things that they don't really talk about. But once you get into vet school and you form this kind of veterinarian community and family with your classmates, you all start noticing that it's like everybody else kind of gets to move on with their life, but you have another 4 years of school. So that's definitely a lot different. But with saying that, I mean, you can still take a weekend every now and then, and you can still like make sure you get your time to, you know, rest and digest everything and kind of cool down. And you know, there's still intramural sports if you want to do that. There's still clubs. So we have the food animal club. There is a feline club. There's a companion animal club. So you still have all those kind of activities like what you did in undergrad that you can work with. So those are kind of like the main differences and similarities between them that I can think of.
Actually, the other students on the call may know this, but I didn't. So vet school is 4 years. Is there any kind of, as in medical school, any kind of internship or residency that has to follow, or can you go right into a job after vet school?
So you can go right into a job. So I chose to. I was done with school after doing 8 years of college. I was like, nope, I'm done. So I just started work right away. But you definitely can sign up to do an internship. You can either find one privately or you can find one through the match program. So it's the same exact match program as if you were going for human medical school. And then most of the time, if you want to go into a residency, you'll have to complete at least one, if not two internships. Again, it all relies on this match program and the algorithm with that. But again, it's not mandatory. If you want to become board certified in something like a board certified surgeon or board certified ophthalmologist, anything like that, you will need to complete an internship and a residency. A lot of my small animal classmates did go on to complete internships, and I know some of them are heading into their residency. But I will say, though, a decent number of them also just went into general practice, and that is completely fine. So you learn everything in veterinary school. You learn everything from a little mouse all the way up to a elephant. So you definitely can go straight into practice and feel okay. And you know, even if you are worried, when you're searching for that job, make sure that you will have good mentors at your job who are willing to take on a new student, or new graduate, and willing to teach them and walk them through it. So again, it's definitely just a personal choice if you want to go on and do an internship or residency or just go straight into work.
Great, that's really helpful. That's really interesting information. So one question from Bella is, what's the average amount of vet schools you should apply to?
Sure. So it's definitely a personal choice, however many you decide to apply to. I applied to, let me think here. So I applied to Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, Michigan, Purdue, and then I applied to Dublin, so Dublin, Ireland. Just because I didn't know if my GPA was going to be able to get me into vet school or not.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a higher number. So just so you guys know, Purdue requires calculus. So don't waste your money on Purdue if you don't want to take calculus. But I have some friends who only applied to Madison and got in. I have some friends who applied to like 10 schools and got in. A huge thing to note is that, and again, I don't remember the exact number that your application first goes out to, if it's 2 or 3, but any vet school after that, I believe it's about $100 extra to apply to them. So that's kind of something you have to factor in, is how much money you want to spend on applying to veterinary schools. And then to make sure before you apply to them that they're schools that you actually want to go to, schools that are in places that you'll be able to afford the housing, that you'll be able to kind of afford just the living expenses, and then C, that places that have the specialty that you want to go into. So for somebody like me, I didn't apply to Illinois because they aren't very strong in dairy or food animals. They're strong in small animals, they're strong in equine, they're strong in wildlife, not food animals. So I didn't even worry about applying there. So those are, again, it's kind of just a personal preference of how much money you want to spend and how many you think you need to apply to. So.
Okay, that's good. I guess talking about cost, Madison was wondering what the average cost of vet school is and how much is the debt usually?
Sure. So right now, I believe Madison is I think they're up to like 30,000 a year. So when I started, it was 19,000 a year. And that's for in-state. And then by the time I was done, it had gone up to 28,000 a year. So they were kind of in a huge tuition climb, which is unfortunate. But I believe they're still pretty much in the ballpark of where everyone else is. So for Madison, for in-state, like I said, it's about 30,000 a year. Out of state at Madison, I think it's about 50,000 a year. So again, that's kind of where it comes in to try and find some in-state schools that you can go to. Average debt of coming out of veterinary school, I believe, when they count everybody who's gone to veterinary school, so that's people who don't have any debt to people who have a lot of debt. I believe it's up around like 175 to 200,000. When they exclude the people who don't have any debt, you're more in like the 250 range. I will say me though, I came out at under 100. So there's definitely ways you can get out with a lot less debt. That was with coming in with 15,000 of undergrad debt too. So you need to look for scholarships like it's your job, because during vet school, that's the only job you have. Well, at least that's the only job that I had, because I didn't want to worry about working anyplace else other than getting veterinary school done. So finding any and every scholarship you think you can apply for and applying for it, even if you spend 5 hours on a scholarship that's only $500, that's still $100 an hour, and you're not going to make that anywhere else. So just focusing on that, focusing on any grants you can get, and then really, making sure if you have to get loans out, that's only going towards your tuition, it's only going towards your living costs, it's only going towards things that you actually need. So you're going to have to cut out, don't go on spring break vacation, or don't go on like elaborate trips or buy a new car or anything like that. Just focus on the stuff you need to get by. So like I said, I was able to make it out way under the average. And I know several of my veterinary colleagues were also able to make it out underneath it, but we watched our pennies and we applied for scholarships, and we worked at making sure we didn't come out in debt just because not coming out in a lot of debt. Just because we knew it'd be harder to pay it back. So
sure. Okay, that's helpful. Lauren, I'm going to go to your question. We have about 5 more minutes, and then Madison, I'll bounce back to your second question. Lauren asked, is there anything else that you can do to stand out on a vet school application?
Sure. So I would say research. So I did research with one of my advisors with dairy calves. Again, I'm sorry if you guys don't like cows, because that's a lot of what I'm talking about. But if you go to one of your advisors or go to a professor you really like and tell them you're interested in research, you can most likely get a grant and start working with them. They'll help you set up a project. They'll help you run through a project. You'll have to write a poster. I actually presented my poster at one of the WiSys presentations with one of my classmates. So in just being able to show that you're kind of going the extra distance, you're wanting to further science and further just, knowing more about mine was about calves. So again, about medical issues with calves. or whatever you decide to go in, I think is huge to them, because it shows that you're not just in it to become a medical doctor, you're in it to actually further science and further the studies and further knowledge and education of the whole concept, which is huge in any type of medical school or degrees, because it's how we keep getting better at what we're doing and how we keep furthering ourselves. So I would say definitely, if you can, just try and do some research, and it doesn't take a lot of time up either. I think my research project, because I did it with somebody else, I want to say it was only like an hour or two every few days. So and if you get a grant, you'll get paid for doing that research too. So it's kind of a double bonus.
Okay. And then the last question is, if you want to specialize in something specific or by animal size, dog, cat, large animal, zoo, et cetera, would there be advisors in vet school to help with that? That was Madison's second question.
Yep, there definitely would be. So regardless of whatever you want to specialize in, if it's in oncology or ophthalmology, surgery, internal medicine, primary care, whatever it is, there's professors specific to that area. And you can always reach out to them. They're super helpful. And if they don't have time or can't answer your questions, they'll definitely pass you on to somebody who can. So, again, the food animal side, I found one of my professors who liked working with calves the most, and she kind of helped put me in the direction of different externships or like different clinics to go to, and then different, areas that I could help her out in. So there's definitely, people who you can go to try and help you figure things out. And, even if you start working with one professor in an area you think you really like, but you find out you don't, they're definitely okay with sending you on and finding you a different area that you like better. So I actually have a friend who totally switched gears on what he wanted to do in veterinary medicine, and he's still, he's actually doing a residency at Wisconsin right now. So they're super helpful and supportive, and they really just want you guys to succeed. So